The evening was quiet, but his heart was anything but calm. He still remembered the exact moment when everything changed between them. It wasn't just a small disagreement or a misunderstanding. It was the kind of fight that leaves scars, the kind of fight that feels like the world you built with someone suddenly crumbles in front of your eyes. They had been standing in the living room, voices echoing louder than they should have. She was tired, frustrated, and he was stubborn, unwilling to let go of his pride. Words flew between them like arrows, each one sharper than the last. What hurt the most was not the fight itself, but the way she looked at him, as if all the love in her eyes had been replaced by disappointment, and then she said it with a trembling voice that broke something deep inside him. "I want nothing to do with you." The sentence struck harder than anything he had ever heard before. For a few seconds he couldn't even breathe. He stood there frozen, hoping she didn't mean it, hoping she would take the words back. But she didn't. Instead, she grabbed her bag, turned around and left, the door slamming shut behind her. The sound echoed through the house and through his heart. That night, he sat alone in the silence, staring at the empty space where she used to sit. Every corner of the room carried a memory of her laughter, her little habits, the warmth she brought into the space. Now it all felt hollow, like someone had taken the color out of his life. He wanted to call her back, to beg her to stay, but his pride kept him rooted in place. And deep down, he feared she truly meant what she said. Days turned into a blur. Friends who knew about the breakup told him he should let her go, that it was better this way. They said sometimes people walk out of your life for a reason, and maybe this was his lesson. But their words didn't ease the ache in his chest. He tried to distract himself with work, with errands, with anything that could keep his mind busy. Yet no matter how much he tried, her voice echoed in his head. "I want nothing to do with you." It wasn't just a sentence, it was a wall, a final line drawn between them. He wondered if she had been holding back those feelings for a long time. Maybe she had been unhappy, and he didn't notice. Maybe he was too focused on himself, too blind to her needs. The guilt began to eat at him, filling his nights with endless questions that had no answers. He found himself replaying their memories together, both the good and the bad. He remembered their first meeting, the way she had smiled shyly, the way they had spent hours talking like they had known each other forever. He remembered their small adventures, their inside jokes, the way they used to fight over silly things only to laugh about them later. Those memories felt like treasures now, but they also cut deep, reminding him of everything he had lost. He tried to convince himself that he was fine, that he didn't need her anymore, but little things betrayed him. Her favorite coffee mug still sat on the kitchen shelf, untouched. An old scarf of hers was still lying at the back of the closet, carrying her scent faintly. Even when he tried to avoid it, life found ways to remind him of her. A song on the radio, a place they once visited, a phrase she used to say. Everything seemed to pull her back into his mind. At night, when the world was quiet, that was when it hurt the most. He would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was also awake somewhere thinking of him, or had she already moved on? Was she laughing with someone else, forgetting everything they once shared? The thought made his chest tighten with a kind of pain he couldn't put into words. He never told anyone how deeply it affected him. To his friends, he acted as if he was okay, as if life had moved on. But inside, he was carrying the weight of unspoken emotions. There were times he wanted to pick up the phone, dial her number, and ask her why. Why did she leave? Why did she say she wanted nothing to do with him? But he never did, afraid of the silence that might follow, or worse, the confirmation that she truly meant it. Time passed, but the wound didn't heal. He learned to live with the ache, but it never completely left. The house no longer felt like home. It felt like a place filled with ghosts of the past. He could still picture her standing in the hallway, still hear the sound of her laughter filling the rooms, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't erase her from his heart. People often say that when someone leaves with harsh words, you should take them at face value. But he couldn't. Something in his heart told him it wasn't the full truth. Maybe she was angry, maybe she was hurt. Maybe those words came from a place of pain rather than hate. But still, they were the last words he heard from her, and that made them real. In the quiet moments, he found himself whispering to the empty walls as if she could hear him somehow. I never wanted it to end like this, but the walls gave no answer, only silence. And yet deep down, a part of him still hoped. He didn't admit it, not even to himself, but the hope remained like a small light in the darkness. Maybe one day she would realize what they had. Maybe one day she would walk back into his life. But for now, all he had were memories, the echo of her words and the emptiness she left behind. The days after she left moved slowly, almost painfully. At first, he thought time would heal him quickly. He told himself that if he stayed busy, if he filled his hours with work and distractions, her memory would fade like a dream. But instead, time seemed to stretch, making every day heavier than the one before. The silence between them became louder than any argument they ever had. There were no phone calls, no messages, not even a simple word from her. The world that once felt connected through her presence now seemed strangely empty. He checked his phone more often than he admitted to himself, sometimes hoping for a text, sometimes hoping to see her name appear on the screen. But the phone never rang. He tried to distract himself by burying his energy in work. His colleagues thought he was focused and determined, but in truth, he was running from his thoughts. When he was busy typing, arranging files, or attending meetings, he didn't have to think about her. But the moment the office grew quiet, when the day ended and he returned home, her absence greeted him at the door. Home didn't feel like home anymore. The room seemed bigger, colder, almost lifeless without her presence. The small details stung the most. Her favorite mug still sat on the shelf in the kitchen, untouched. There was a scarf she had once left draped over the back of a chair, and though he thought of packing it away, something inside him couldn't let it go. Even the faint smell of her perfume lingered in the corners of the house, a reminder of the warmth that used to fill the space. He tried hiding these reminders. He placed her mug in the back of the cupboard, folded the scarf, and kept it deep in the closet. But no matter what he did, she always found her way back into his thoughts. A song playing on the radio would remind him of the times they drove together, singing loudly without care. A familiar street corner would remind him of a late evening walk they once shared. Even in small things like seeing someone else with her hairstyle, his heart would skip, only to sink when he realized it wasn't her. As weeks turned into months, the silence between them grew into something more than just distance. It became a test of patience, of endurance, of the heart's ability to hold on and let go at the same time. He wanted to believe he had moved forward, but every night when he lay in bed, the ache inside reminded him he hadn't. He often thought about their last fight, replaying it over and over like a scene from a movie he couldn't stop watching. He wondered if he could have handled it differently. Maybe if he had kept his voice calm. Maybe if he had listened more and argued less, she wouldn't have walked away. The guilt pressed heavily on him, making him question not only his words that day, but every little moment leading up to it. Had he made her feel unimportant? Did she feel unseen, unheard? The questions haunted him and he had no answers. Sometimes he tried to be angry at her. He told himself she was the one who gave up. She was the one who chose to walk away. But the anger never lasted. It always turned into longing, into missing her, into remembering the way she smiled when she was truly happy. The truth was, he couldn't hate her. No matter what words she had said, his heart didn't know how to stop caring. Friends noticed the change in him. They told him he should go out, meet new people, try to start fresh. He nodded, sometimes even agreed to join them, but his heart wasn't in it. When someone asked if he was okay, he smiled politely and said yes. But deep down, he knew he wasn't. He was only surviving, not living. The silence between them wasn't Just the absence of words, it was the weight of everything left unsaid. There were apologies that never reached her ears, confessions that stayed locked in his heart, and hopes that never had the chance to be shared. He wondered if she also carried these unspoken things, or if she had managed to put everything behind. Her nights were the hardest. When the world was quiet and he was left with only his thoughts, memories of her came rushing in. He remembered the way she used to sit beside him on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder. He remembered the comfort of her presence, how even silence felt different when she was around, how silence only felt empty. And yet in that emptiness there was still a faint light of hope. He didn't admit it, not to his friends and not even to himself most of the time. But deep inside he wished the silence would break one day. He wished to hear a knock at the door, to see her name on the phone, to hear her voice saying his name again. But as each day passed without a word, he tried to teach himself not to expect it. He told himself that some bonds are broken forever, that sometimes people really mean it when they say they want nothing to do with you. Still, the heart is stubborn. It remembers what the mind tries to forget. So he carried on, living in the shadow of silence where memories and unanswered questions lived side by side. The world around him continued as normal. People laughed, worked, celebrated, and moved on. But inside, his world was still paused at that moment, the moment she left, the moment her words echoed like a final chapter. He didn't know it yet, but this silence wasn't the end of the story. It was only the space between chapters, a waiting room where both of them were figuring out what their hearts truly wanted. But for now, he could only endure, hoping that one day the silence would break and life would give him the answer he longed for. The night was colder than usual, and the rain poured down endlessly, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. He sat alone in his small living room, the soft light of a lamp casting shadows on the walls. The sound of the rain outside seemed to match the heaviness in his chest. Nights like these always reminded him of her, though in truth almost everything did. He was holding a book, but he hadn't turned a page in the last half hour. His mind kept drifting, wandering into memories he thought he had buried. He sighed, closed the book, and leaned back in his chair listening to the storm outside. It was just another lonely evening or so, he thought. Then, suddenly, there was a knock at the door. At first, he thought he imagined it. Who would come to visit in the middle of a rainy night? The knock came again, louder this time, echoing through the quiet house. Confused, he stood up, walked to the door, and hesitated for a moment before opening it. The sight before him made his heart stop. She was standing there, the very person he had convinced himself he might never see again. Her hair was wet, sticking to her face, and her clothes were damp from the rain. She looked exhausted, but her eyes, those familiar eyes, were filled with emotions he couldn't quite read. For a moment, both of them just stared at each other, frozen in disbelief. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The only thing he managed to whisper was her name, as if speaking it would prove she was real, and not just another memory haunting him. She didn't speak right away either. Her lips trembled slightly, and for a second it seemed like she was struggling to find the courage to say anything at all. Finally, in a quiet voice, she asked, "Can I come in?" Without thinking, he stepped aside, allowing her to enter. The sound of rain filled the silence as she walked past him into the living room. He closed the door, his mind racing with questions. Why was she here? Why now? What had changed after all this time? She sat down on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly together as if she was trying to keep herself steady. He could see that she was nervous. He sat across from her, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure she could hear it. For a while, neither of them said anything. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the words left unsaid over the months they had been apart. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but uncertain. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Her eyes lifted to meet his, and for the first time he saw the vulnerability in them. She took a shaky breath, and though her voice was quiet, it carried the weight of honesty. "I didn't think I'd come back either." The room fell silent again. Outside, the storm raged on, But inside, it felt as though time had stopped. He studied her face, noticing how tired she looked, how the spark that once shone so brightly in her eyes seemed dimmer now. And yet, despite everything, she was here. He wanted to ask her 100 questions. Why had she come? What made her change her mind? Did she still feel the same anger that once made her shout those painful words? But he couldn't bring himself to push too hard. He was afraid she might disappear again if he did. Instead, he simply nodded, as if giving her the space to speak when she was ready. She glanced down at her hands, then back up at him, her voice trembling. I know I said I wanted nothing to do with you. I know I hurt you. She paused, swallowing hard. But I couldn't stay away forever. I really tried, but no matter what I did, I kept thinking of you. His heart ached at her words. Part of him felt relief, but another part felt the sting of old wounds reopening. He leaned forward, slightly, his eyes fixed on hers. Why tonight? He asked gently. She hesitated, then smiled sadly. Because sometimes, when you lose something, you don't realize how much it meant to you until it's gone. And tonight, I just couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed to see you. Her honesty hit him harder than any argument they ever had. He realized that beneath her strong words months ago, there had been pain she didn't know how to express. And maybe, in his own pride, he had failed to see it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rain against the windows and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. He wanted to reach out to hold her hand, but he stopped himself. He wasn't sure if it was the right time or if she was ready for that closeness again. She looked around the room, her gaze landing on the little things she once knew so well: the coffee table, the chair she used to sit in, the bookshelf she once teased him about for being too messy. A soft sigh escaped her lips, and she whispered almost to herself, "It feels like nothing has changed, but at the same time, everything has." Her words mirrored his thoughts perfectly. The house was the same. The furniture was the same. Even the silence felt familiar. But the distance between them, the invisible wall built by months of silence and hurt, made everything feel different. He wanted to ask if she planned to stay, or if she would leave again once the storm passed. But instead, he chose to let the moment breathe. She was here, and that was enough for now. They sat in silence for a long time, two people who once loved deeply, now trying to find the courage to bridge the gap between them. Every second stretched, carrying with it the weight of the past and the fragile hope of the future. He didn't know what would come next, but one thing was clear. This night was not ordinary. It was the beginning of something neither of them had expected. She had walked away with final words months ago, but here she was again, knocking on his door, breaking the silence, and perhaps, unknowingly, opening the door to a second chance. As the rain outside began to soften, he realized his life was about to change again. For better or worse, her return meant that the story between them was not finished. The silence in the room felt heavier than ever. Both of them had so much to say, yet neither knew how to begin. He could feel her eyes on him, searching for a sign, a hint, anything that would tell her how he truly felt. His heart raced, and he struggled to find the words, knowing that whatever he said could either bring them closer or push her away again. Finally, she broke the silence. "I know I hurt you," she said softly. "I was angry and proud, and I didn't know how to say what I really felt. I wanted to protect myself, I think, but I ended up hurting you instead." Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the emotions she had been holding back for months. He listened carefully, letting her words sink in. For so long he had replayed that fight in his mind, blaming himself, blaming her, wondering if there was a way to fix what had been broken. Now, hearing her admit her mistakes and fears, he felt a mix of relief and sorrow. Relief, because the wall between them was finally showing cracks, and sorrow, because it had taken so long to reach this moment. "I missed you," he finally said, his voice low and steady. "Every day I missed you. And I tried to move on, but I couldn't. Nothing felt right without you here. She nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. I missed you too, more than I wanted to admit. I thought walking away would make things easier, but it didn't. Nights were the hardest. I kept thinking about what we had, about the little moments that mattered more than I realized. And I realized I still care, more than I thought I could. His chest tightened. The honesty in her words made his heart ache and soar at the same time. He wanted to reach out and hold her, to tell her everything he had been feeling, but he paused, knowing that rushing could make her pull away again. Instead, he let the silence fill the space between them, letting them both breathe and absorb the truth of what had been said. She shifted slightly, glancing around the room as if seeing it through new eyes. Everything here, it's the same, but it's different now, she said quietly. I see all the things I missed, all the things I took for granted, and I realize that I don't want to lose this again. Not without trying to fix it. He reached out slowly, his hand brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. The touch was simple, almost hesitant, but it carried with it months of longing, months of regret, and months of hope. We can try, he said softly, his fingers entwining with hers. I don't know what the future will look like, but I know I don't want to give up on us. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, but she smiled through them. I don't want to give up either, she whispered. I don't want to pretend anymore. I want to be honest, fully honest, even if it scares me. Because I know now that what we had was real. And maybe it still is. The storm outside continued, but inside the room, there was a sense of calm, a fragile peace that neither had felt for months. They spoke slowly, carefully, sharing thoughts and feelings that had been locked away. She explained why she had said those hurtful words, how pride and fear had pushed her away. He shared how lonely he had felt, how he had longed for her presence, how every memory had haunted him. As the night deepened, they laughed quietly at memories of past arguments, remembering how silly and small some of their fights had seemed, in hindsight. They reminisced about their happiest moments, the little adventures, the quiet nights, the inside jokes that only they understood. Each shared story, each honest word, was like a step toward rebuilding what had been broken. He realized that the pain they had endured wasn't just sorrow, it was proof of how deeply they cared. They had hurt each other, yes, but that hurt was born from love, from passion, from the intensity of their connection. And now, facing it together, they had the chance to grow stronger, to understand each other better, to build something more real than before. By the time the first light of dawn began to peek through the window, they were still sitting close, hands intertwined, hearts slowly unburdening themselves. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, just quiet honesty, the kind that lasts, the kind that builds trust again. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges, but for the first time in months, they felt hope. She leaned against him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. He felt her breathe, steady and calm now, and he realized that some bonds cannot be broken, no matter how harsh the words, no matter how long the silence. What they had endured only made them understand the depth of their feelings more clearly, and as they sat there, the storm outside slowly fading, they both knew something important. Love is not about avoiding pain. It is about facing it together, with honesty, patience, and courage. They had found each other again, not by accident, but because their hearts had never truly let go. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the streets outside wet and glistening. They stepped out together, walking slowly, talking quietly, feeling the cool freshness of the morning. Every step felt like a small victory, every shared smile a promise. The past was still there, but it no longer controlled them. The future was uncertain, but they were ready to face it together. He looked at her, really looked, and felt a warmth that had been missing for too long. She looked back at him with the same understanding, the same trust, the same love that had drawn them together in the first place, and in that moment neither wanted to let the other go again. The morning sun cast a gentle light across the room as they sat together, still wrapped in the quiet peace of the night before. The rain had stopped and the air smelled fresh, carrying with it the hope of a new beginning. They didn't speak much because words weren't needed. The silence now was comforting, a sign that they were both ready to face what came next, together. They knew the past couldn't be erased. The hurtful words, the months of distance, the nights of longing, those things were part of their story. But they also knew that what they had learned from the past was more valuable than anything else. They had learned about honesty, about patience, about the importance of listening and understanding. And most of all, they had learned that love is stronger than fear, stronger than anger, stronger than pride. He made her tea, the small gestures of everyday life feeling extraordinary because they were sharing them together again. She smiled at him, a quiet, genuine smile that reached her eyes, and in that smile he saw forgiveness, hope, and love all at once. He returned the smile, feeling his own heart lighten with every passing moment. They talked about small things. At first, the weather, a news story, a neighbor they hadn't seen in months. It was ordinary, but ordinary felt magical now because they were together. Then the conversation slowly shifted to deeper topics, the kind that truly mattered. They spoke of dreams, of fears, of the future they wanted to create. Every word was spoken with care, every thought shared with honesty. At one point she laughed, and it was a sound he had missed more than he realized. It wasn't forced or fake. It was pure and real, the kind of laughter that fills a room and lifts a heart. He laughed with her, and for the first time in months the heaviness in his chest felt lighter. They made a small promise to each other, to always speak honestly, to never let pride push them apart again, to cherish the little moments as much as the big ones. They knew there would be challenges ahead, moments when old fears might resurface, but they also knew that together they could face anything. As the day went on, they stepped outside into the sunlight, feeling the warmth on their faces. The streets were still wet from the rain, and the world looked fresh, renewed, almost as if it were reflecting the new chapter of their lives. They walked slowly side by side, talking quietly, holding hands without needing to say how much it meant. They stopped at a park they used to visit often. The swings swayed slightly in the breeze, and the flowers were bright and colorful, untouched by time. They sat on a bench looking at the world around them, feeling the presence of each other and realizing that the simple act of being together was enough to heal many of the wounds they had carried. He looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who had been through struggles, someone who had been hurt and afraid, but who had also grown stronger. She looked at him the same way, seeing someone who had been patient, who had held on even when hope seemed distant. In that shared understanding, they found a bond deeper than anything they had ever known. Time passed, but they didn't notice. The world around them continued, but for a while only they existed in their own small universe of trust, love, and renewed connection. They spoke, laughed, shared memories, and even sat in comfortable silence. Every moment felt meaningful, every shared glance a promise. As evening approached, they walked back home, hearts light and minds clear. They knew the journey ahead wouldn't be without challenges, but they also knew that whatever came, they had each other. And sometimes, that was enough, more than enough, to face anything life threw their way. When they returned to the house, he held the door open for her and she smiled, a mixture of gratitude and love in her eyes. She stepped inside, and as he closed the door behind her, it felt like the closing of a chapter of pain and the opening of a chapter of hope. That night they sat together once more, talking quietly, planning small things, dreaming big things. They knew that love was not perfect, but they also knew it was real, and that was what mattered. They had faced silence, fear, and distance, and